The sky above the plains was wide and endless, the kind of sky that made even the strongest feel small. Beneath it, Clara bent low over the dry earth, her hands raw from digging at the stubborn roots of wild onions. She had hoped to find enough for supper, but the soil gave her nothing. The land had grown stingy, and so had the town. Folks kept their bread locked away behind counters and their sympathy hidden behind eyes that judged too quickly. Behind her, a small cough broke the stillness. Clara turned and saw her younger sister, Mary, leaning against the doorway of their shack. The child's face was pale, her cheeks hollow. Each breath seemed to cost her effort, as though life itself was a heavy burden she struggled to carry. Clara rose quickly, brushing dirt from her skirt, though she had little to hide. Poverty clung to her like dust, seen by all, pitied by none. "Go lie down, Mary," Clara said softly. "I'll have something warm for you before the sun sets." But Mary only shook her head, her eyes glassy with fever. "There's no wood for fire," she whispered. The truth of it sank like a stone in Clara's chest. No wood, no food. Nothing but cold nights and an empty stomach waiting for them both. She bit her lip hard enough to taste blood, as if pain might force back the tears that wanted to come. Tears were useless. They could not fill a belly or stop a cough. The sound of laughter drifted from the distant town, carried on the dry wind. Somewhere others were eating bread, drinking coffee, living as though the world was not cruel. Clara's jaw tightened. She had begged once, gone door to door with her sister clinging to her skirts, asking for scraps. She remembered the faces that turned away, the doors that closed too quickly. She had felt the sting of words like charity case, burden, and thief in waiting. Thief in waiting. The thought returned to her as she walked toward town that evening, Mary's shallow breathing still echoing in her ears. The main street was nearly quiet now, the shops closing for the night. The bakery, though, still glowed with lamplight. Warmth and the smell of fresh bread poured out as the baker set loaves in the window, golden and round as if mocking her. Clara stood there for a long time, her fingers twisting in her skirt. She had never stolen before. Her mother had taught her dignity even in hunger, and her father had once been a man of means before death and debt left them stranded. But her mother was gone, her father buried, and Mary was fading fast. What good was pride to a girl coughing herself to death? Her stomach clenched as she pressed her hand to the doorframe. She saw the baker step into the back room. In that moment, desperation made her brave or foolish. Clara moved quickly, her heart pounding so loud she thought it might betray her. She slipped inside, her fingers snatching one loaf from the tray. The bread was still warm, soft beneath her trembling hands. She turned to leave, but the world seemed to crash down around her with a single voice. "Stop." The word was calm but firm, steady as a rope pulled tight. Clara froze. From the shadow of the doorway stepped a tall man, broad in the shoulders, his coat dusted with the day's ride. His eyes were sharp, not with cruelty but with something heavier. Judgment, perhaps, or curiosity. The bread slipped slightly in her grasp. She opened her mouth, but no sound came. For the first time in her life, Clara had stolen. For the first time, she had been caught. And standing before her was not the baker, but a rancher she had seen only from a distance, Elias Hart, the man who owned half the grazing land outside town. Clara's breath caught as Elias Hart stepped closer, his boots sounding heavy on the wooden floor. The bread felt like a stone in her hands now, its warmth turning into shame. She expected him to shout, to grab her arm and drag her out into the street where the town could see. She imagined the whispers, "There goes the thief girl." She couldn't even keep her sister alive without turning to crime. But Elias did not shout. He only looked at her, his brow furrowed as though he were weighing something unseen. His voice, when it came, was quiet but steady. "That loaf belongs to the baker," he said. "But I reckon you didn't take it for yourself." Clara's lips trembled. "Please," she whispered, though she wasn't sure what she was asking for. Forgiveness, mercy, or simply the chance to run. "It's my sister. She hasn't eaten in 2 days. Something flickered in Elias's eyes then, a spark of understanding. He glanced at the loaf, then back to Clara. "You could have asked," he said. "I did." The words burst from her before she could stop them. "I begged and they turned me away. They said we weren't worth saving." Her voice broke and she hated herself for it. She had promised Mary she'd stay strong, but now her weakness showed plain before a stranger. She clutched the bread tighter, ready to fight if he tried to take it back. Instead, Elias leaned against the counter, his arms crossing over his chest. His silence stretched until it felt like another kind of judgment. Finally he spoke. "If I let you walk out with that loaf, tomorrow you'll be back. And the day after. Hunger doesn't quit." Clara swallowed hard, shame and anger twisting inside her. "What would you have me do? Let my sister die?" The rancher studied her face as if measuring her worth against the desperation she carried. Then without warning his tone shifted. Low, thoughtful, almost like he was speaking to himself. "There's another way," he said. Clara frowned. "Another way?" His gaze held hers, steady and unflinching. "You need more than bread. You need a roof, wood for fire, and medicine. You need someone to stand between you and a town that's already marked you." "I don't understand." "You will," Elias replied. "Steal my name too." The words struck her harder than a slap. She blinked, certain she had misheard. "What did you say?" "I said take my name, be my wife. Folks won't spit on you if you carry the Hart name. Your sister will have food, a bed, and the care she needs." For a moment, Clara could only stare at him, her pulse roaring in her ears. Marriage to this man? It was unthinkable. She had seen him from afar, always alone, always watchful, a figure of quiet strength. But he was still a stranger. And she a thief in his eyes. Why? She breathed. Elias's jaw tightened, though his voice stayed calm. "Because I've seen what this town does to the weak. And I won't stand by while they bury another child for want of bread. I can give you a place. All I ask is honesty and the work a rancher's wife must shoulder." Clara's fingers trembled against the loaf, the weight of his offer pressing heavier than hunger itself. She wanted to refuse, to cling to the little pride she had left, but Mary's coughing echoed in her mind, and pride could not warm her sister through another winter night. "I don't even know you," she whispered. Elias's gaze softened. "Just a fraction. Then you'll learn." The silence between them grew thick. Clara's heart pounded with fear, hope, and disbelief all tangled together. For the first time she wondered if stealing bread had led her not to ruin, but to a choice that could change everything. Clara walked back through the dark streets with the bread clutched to her chest, Elias Hart's words echoing in her mind. "Steal my name too." She replayed them over and over, as though by turning them over in her thoughts she might uncover the hidden meaning. The loaf felt lighter than it had before, maybe because she no longer thought of it as stolen. He had let her keep it, but the weight in her chest had only grown heavier. A man she barely knew had offered marriage as though it were nothing more than another bargain at the market, yet she could not deny the pull of his words. Food, shelter, safety for Mary. When Clara pushed open the door of their shack, Mary stirred weakly on the cot. Her eyes fluttered open, dull but searching. "Clara?" she whispered. Clara knelt beside her and pressed the bread into her hands. "Eat slowly," she murmured. "It's fresh." Mary's small fingers tore at the crust, her lips trembling as she chewed. Tears pricked at Clara's eyes as she watched her sister swallow the first bite in days. For that alone, the theft, if theft it was, had been worth it. But Elias's face haunted her, his voice calm and certain. "Be my wife." Mary ate half a slice before exhaustion claimed her again. Clara tucked the blanket close around her and sat by the bedside, the shadows deepening in the corners of the room. The shack was quiet except for Mary's fragile breathing, and in that quiet Clara wrestled with herself. Could she give herself to a man she did not love? Could she stand beside him in the eyes of the town, knowing they would call her thief bride whether she deserved the title or not? Her pride flared at the thought, and yet it crumbled beneath the greater truth. Pride would not keep Mary alive. The next morning Clara rose early, her stomach knotted. She walked the road leading out of town, past the fields that stretched wide beneath the pale light. She spotted him before she meant to. Elias, riding his horse along the fence line, his figure strong and solitary against the horizon. He noticed her at once. Pulling the reins, he slowed, his eyes sharp as they met hers. "You've been thinking," he said simply. Clara hesitated, the wind tugging at her worn shawl. "I came to tell you. I don't understand why you'd ask me." He dismounted, his boots crunching on the gravel as he approached. The horse snorted softly behind him. "You think it's charity?" She lifted her chin, though her voice trembled. "Isn't it?" Elias shook his head. "Charity is coins dropped in a beggar's hand and forgotten by nightfall. What I'm offering is a name, a life tied to mine. That's no charity, it's a choice for both of us." Clara stared at him, searching his face for mockery or pity. She found neither. His expression was serious, as though he had weighed this long before she appeared in his path. "But why me?" she asked again, quieter this time. "Because you fight," Elias said. "Most would have let hunger hollow them out. But you'd risk shame, risk everything for your sister. That kind of grit belongs on a ranch, belongs beside me." The words stunned her, striking something deep inside she hadn't known was there. To be seen not as a burden, but as someone strong. It was more than she had ever been given. Still, doubt clung to her. She looked back toward the shack, where Mary lay weak and waiting. "If I say yes," Clara said slowly, "what happens then?" "Then," Elias replied, his voice steady, "you and your sister come to my ranch. You'll work, you'll eat, and no man in this town will dare spit on your name again." Clara's heart pounded. The path before her seemed terrifying and unknown, but behind her lay only hunger and despair. For Mary's sake, could she choose this stranger's vow? That evening, Clara sat beside Mary, turning Elias' heart's offer over in her mind like a coin she dared not spend. Her sister's small frame shook with every cough, her forehead hot beneath Clara's palm. The loaf of bread had already dwindled to crumbs, and the cold crept in through the thin walls. Clara whispered to herself, almost like a prayer, "What choice do I have?" Mary stirred. Her voice was faint, but her eyes were searching. "Clara, did something happen?" Clara hesitated. She had hidden her shame, not wanting her sister to know about the theft. But hiding would not change the truth. She smoothed back Mary's hair and said softly, "I stole bread tonight." Mary's eyes widened, fear flashing there. "You'll be caught." "I was caught," Clara admitted, her throat tightening. "But it wasn't the baker. It was Elias Hart." Mary blinked. Even in her weakness, she recognized the name. Everyone in town knew it. "The rancher?" Clara nodded. "He didn't turn me in. He offered me something instead." Mary coughed again, her small hand clutching Clara's sleeve. "What did he want?" Clara's lips trembled. The words felt heavy on her tongue. "He asked me to marry him." For a moment, silence filled the shack, broken only by Mary's uneven breathing. Then her eyes widened further. "Mary, but why?" "I don't know," Clara whispered. "He said I was strong, that he wouldn't let us starve, that if I took his name we'd have food, warmth, and safety." Mary was quiet, her gaze thoughtful despite her fever. Finally she said, "Do you trust him?" Clara looked away, her eyes fixed on the flickering shadows. Trust? She had barely spoken 20 words to Elias Hart before tonight. And yet, there had been no cruelty in his eyes, no hunger for advantage. Only a steady calm and an odd kind of respect. "I don't know," Clara admitted, "but I trust that without help you'll die. And I can't lose you." Mary's fingers squeezed hers weakly. "Then maybe God sent him." Clara's throat ached at those words. She had prayed so often and the heavens had seemed silent. But perhaps this man, this stranger, was the answer she had begged for. The next morning, with her heart pounding, Clara walked to Elias Hart's ranch. It lay beyond the town, stretching out across rolling fields and wooden fences that glistened with frost. Smoke curled from the chimney of a sturdy house, and horses grazed in the pasture beyond. It was a place alive with work and promise, so far from the hunger and despair she had known. Elias met her at the gate. He wore no smile, but his eyes softened when they met hers. "You came," he said simply. Clara swallowed hard. "I came because of my sister. If I agree, it will be for her." "Not for me." He nodded as though he expected no less. "Then we understand each other." Clara's hands tightened around the frayed edges of her shawl. "If I take your name, what will the town say?" "They'll talk," Elias said. "But words can't starve you, and they can't touch what's under this roof." He gestured toward the house. "What matters is what you and I build here, not what they whisper." His steadiness unsettled her, but also strangely calmed her. She drew in a shaky breath. "And you ask nothing else of me?" "Work beside me," Elias replied. "Care for your sister. Keep the home as best you can. That's all I ask." Clara's chest rose and fell as if she were standing on the edge of a cliff. Then, with the weight of Mary's fragile breath in her mind, she gave a small nod. "I'll do it." Elias's eyes held hers for a long moment. Then he said, "So it begins." The morning of the wedding was quiet and plain. There were no flowers, no gathering of friends or family. Only the town preacher. Elias, Hart, Clara, and Mary stood weak but smiling faintly at her sister's side. The vows were spoken with simple words. Nothing fancy, just promises made in the cool air of a wooden chapel. Clara's hands shook as she held the small Bible the preacher pressed into her palms. When he asked if she would take Elias as her husband, she hesitated for half a breath. Then she whispered, "I will." Elias's answer was steady without pause. "I will." It was done in less than 10 minutes. No one in the town cared to come watch. Perhaps some had heard and chosen to stay away. Perhaps some would whisper later. Clara felt their absence like a shadow. But when Elias placed his hat back on his head and offered his arm, she took it, her sister leaning close behind them. The ride to the ranch felt endless, though the land around them was wide and beautiful. Clara kept her gaze forward, her heart heavy with the strangeness of it all. She was married now, bound to a man whose name she carried but whose life she did not yet know. When they reached the ranch house, Elias lifted Mary gently from the wagon, carrying her inside with surprising care. Clara followed, her eyes wide as she stepped into the home. The wooden floors shone clean, the hearth burned warm, and shelves lined with jars of preserves filled the kitchen. It was not grand, but it was full in a way their shack had never been. Mary's eyes lit up despite her sickness. "Clara, it's beautiful." Clara swallowed the lump in her throat. "Yes," she whispered, though inside she felt like an outsider stepping into a world that was not hers. Elias set Mary down on a sturdy bed already prepared with quilts. He looked at Clara then. "Your sister needs rest. I'll fetch the doctor to come by tomorrow. He owes me a favor." Clara nodded, her hands twisting in her skirt. "Thank you." The days that followed passed slowly. Clara learned the rhythm of ranch life, how to rise before dawn to stoke the fire, how to prepare simple meals from the stores in the cellar, how to mend torn shirts with steady stitches. Elias worked from sunrise to dusk tending to cattle, fixing fences and breaking horses. He spoke little, his words always plain and measured yet never unkind. At first silence filled the space between them. Clara avoided his eyes, ashamed of how little she knew about him, how awkwardly she moved in a house that felt more his than theirs. But Elias never demanded more than she could give. When Mary's cough worsened one night, he sat awake by the fire until morning, ready with hot water and blankets. He said nothing of it, but Clara saw. Still, the whispers from town reached her ears when she went for supplies. Women glanced at her with knowing smirks. Men muttered "thief bride" under their breath. Clara bore it in silence, but each word was like a thorn pressing deeper. That evening, when Elias returned from the fields, she found herself blurting out, "They'll never see me as your equal. To them, I'll always be the girl who stole bread." Elias removed his hat and set it on the table. His eyes met hers with quiet firmness. Let them say what they will. They don't eat at our table. They don't share our roof. Their words can't shape who you are unless you let them. Clara stared at him, struck by his calm certainty. Part of her wanted to believe him. Part of her wanted to cling to her anger. But deep down something fragile stirred, like the first green shoot pushing through cold soil. Maybe, just maybe, there was more here than survival. Winter settled over the plains with biting winds and skies heavy with gray. Life on the ranch grew harder with each passing week. Clara worked from dawn until her hands ached, learning to bake bread from flour instead of stealing it, learning to tend the animals when Elias was away mending fences. The work was endless, but it filled the hollowness she had carried for so long. Mary, though, remained weak. Some days her cough was softer, her cheeks touched by a faint color. Other days the sickness gripped her tighter. Clara feared that despite all the comfort the ranch gave, it might not be enough to save her sister. Elias never turned away from that fear. When Clara broke down one night, tears slipping silently down her face, Elias came and stood in the doorway. He did not touch her, did not offer empty words, but his presence was steady, like the oak beams holding up the roof. You're not alone, anymore, he said simply. Those words stayed with Clara. She had never realized how heavy loneliness had been until someone lifted even a corner of it from her shoulders. But the world outside the ranch was not so kind. On her next trip into town, she heard the whispers grow louder. Bought her with bread, one man muttered. Married a thief, another sneered. The women at the mercantile looked her up and down with curled lips, as if the dirt of poverty still clung to her no matter how hard she scrubbed. Clara kept her chin high, though each word cut deep. She wanted to scream that they didn't know her, that they hadn't watched their sister starve. But silence was safer. Silence and the strength to walk away. When she returned to the ranch, Elias was repairing a saddle by the barn. She placed the supplies inside, her face burning with shame. He glanced up, reading her without needing to ask. They talked again, he said. Clara pressed her lips together. Always. Elias set the saddle aside and came closer, his voice calm but firm. Then let them talk. You can't live by their judgment, her frustration boiled over. Easy for you to say. You've always been respected. No one calls you names. No one looks at you like you're a stain that won't wash out. For the first time, she saw a flicker of something sharp in his eyes. Respect wasn't given to me, he said. It was earned with blood, sweat, and loss. You think folks welcomed me when I first came here? Half the town said I'd fail, that I'd be gone before winter. But I stayed. And I built something they couldn't tear down with words. Clara's chest rose and fell quickly. His tone wasn't angry, but it was fierce. Steady like a hammer striking truth into stone. You'll earn your place too. Elias continued. Not because of me. Because you've got the grit for it. The words settled deep in Clara's heart. She wanted to believe them. She wanted to believe she was more than a mistake. More than a thief caught with bread in her hands. That night, as she tucked Mary into bed, Clara found herself whispering, Do you think I belong here? Mary smiled faintly, her voice raspy. You belong wherever someone needs you, and Elias needs you. I can see it even if you can't. Clara sat back, startled by the certainty in her sister's words. For the first time, she wondered if her marriage was not only a rescue, but something slowly taking root, something she hadn't dared dream of. Spring brought new life to the ranch. Snow melted into streams. Grass pushed up through the thawing earth, and the cattle grew restless with the changing season. Clara found herself caught in the rhythm of it all, hauling water, tending chickens, mending clothes until her fingers were sore. Mary's health wavered like the weather. Some days she was strong enough to walk outside and breathe the clean air. Other days she barely lifted her head from the pillow. Clara clung to hope, believing the warmth of the season would bring healing. But the outside world would not leave them in peace. Trouble began with whispers, then turned into something harder. A group of rustlers had been spotted near town, stealing cattle under the cover of night. Men at the saloon muttered about Elias Hart's land being a target. Some even said it was fitting. He had married a thief, so thieves would come for him. Clara heard it herself one afternoon while buying flour. The words stung worse than before because this time they were laced with warning. Her marriage had not just made her an outcast, it had painted a target on the ranch. When she returned home, she found Elias tightening the corral gates, his jaw set hard. She waited until the last nail was hammered in before she asked, "Is it true? Are the rustlers coming this way?" Elias wiped sweat from his brow, his eyes narrowing. "They've taken stock from neighbors already. My land holds good cattle. They'll come." Fear gripped her, cold and sharp. "Then what will you do?" "What I must," Elias said. "I'll ride the fence line each night. I won't let them take what's ours." Clara's heart jolted at the word ours. It was the first time he had spoken of the ranch as belonging to her, too. But fear still pressed down on her. She thought of Mary, fragile in her bed, and of herself, still learning how to keep a household running. If Elias felt a gunfire or an ambush, what would become of them? That night, Clara lay awake, listening to the howl of coyotes across the plains. The bed felt too large, the silence too heavy. She rose quietly, stepping outside into the moonlight. In the distance, she saw Elias on horseback, his figure steady against the silver horizon. Watching. Guarding. Something stirred in her chest, something both heavy and tender. She realized then that this marriage, strange as it was, had bound her fate to his. If danger came, it would strike them both, and she could not stand by, helpless, waiting for him to shield her. The next morning she surprised him by stepping into the barn, her chin lifted. "Teach me to shoot," she said. Elias turned, his brow furrowed. "A rifle is no toy." "I know," Clara replied firmly. "But if the rustlers come when you're not here, what then? I won't let Mary be left to their mercy." For a long moment he studied her as though searching for weakness. Then slowly he nodded. "All right, but you'll learn properly. No foolishness," and so she did. Elias showed her how to hold the rifle steady, how to breathe slowly before squeezing the trigger. The first shot startled her so much she nearly dropped the weapon. But Elias only said, "Again." Her hands bruised from the recoil. Her ears rang with the sound, but she didn't stop. By the end of the week, she could strike a tin can from 20 paces. Elias gave a small grunt of approval, the closest thing to praise she had yet earned from him. Clara felt something shift within her. No longer just the thief bride or the caretaker of a sick child, she was becoming something more. A partner, a protector. And when the rustlers finally came, she knew she would not face them with fear alone. The first sign of trouble came on a night thick with clouds, when the moonlight could barely touch the earth. The ranch lay in near darkness, the cattle restless in their pens. Clara sat by the hearth, Mary asleep in the corner bed while Elias strapped on his revolver. His face was calm, but the set of his shoulders told her he was bracing for a storm. "They're out there," he said. "I can feel it." Clara's throat tightened. "Then let me come with you." Elias shook his head. "No, stay with Mary. If anything happens, you keep the rifle close. Do you understand?" She nodded, though her chest ached with the thought of him riding into danger alone. She watched him disappear into the night, the sound of his horse fading into the wind. Then silence fell, long, heavy, pressing. The minutes dragged. Clara's ears caught every creak of the house, every rustle of wind against the shutters. She sat with the rifle across her lap, her hands trembling slightly. At last the sound came, distant shouts, then the faint echo of gunfire. Mary stirred, coughing weakly. "Clara!" "Stay down," Clara whispered, pressing her sister's hand. "It's only Elias. He'll send them running." But her words were more for herself than for Mary. Moments later, the door banged open. Elias strode in, his coat dusted with dirt, his jaw tight. Clara sprang to her feet. "They tried the north fence," he said, his voice low. "3 men. I chased them off, her eyes widened. Did they hurt you? Not tonight, he answered, but his gaze was dark with warning. They'll be back. They saw the herd, and they know I won't give it up easily. The days that followed were tense. Elias kept his rifle close, and Clara stayed alert, her eyes on the horizon whenever he rode out. The townsfolk, too, seemed eager for the ranch to fall. Whispers reached her ears. The Hart place won't stand long. That thief bride brought ruin with her. The words cut deep, but Clara buried the pain beneath determination. She would not give those voices power. Not anymore. Then came the night when the rustlers struck in force. Clara woke to the thunder of hooves and the panicked cries of cattle. Elias was already at the door, rifle in hand. Stay inside, he ordered, his tone sharp. But Clara stepped forward, her own rifle clutched tight. I won't hide. Not this time. Elias looked at her, surprise flickering in his eyes. Then he gave a short nod. Stay close. They rushed into the night together. Flames from a lantern swung wildly near the pens, shadows leaping as the rustlers drove cattle toward the open gate. Shouts filled the air, mingled with the bawling of terrified animals. Elias fired first, a warning shot into the sky. The rustlers scattered, but two turned their guns back. Bullets cracked through the night, striking wood and earth. Clara's heart pounded, but she remembered his lessons. Breathe steady, aim sure. She lifted the rifle and squeezed the trigger. The shot rang true, striking the dirt near the men's boots. They cursed, startled by fire from the house itself. Elias took the chance to drive them back, his rifle blazing. In the chaos, Clara felt no fear, only fierce resolve. She would protect this place, this roof that sheltered Mary, this bond that had begun to grow between her and Elias. When the last of the rustlers fled into the dark, the ranch fell quiet again, save for the restless cattle. Clara lowered her rifle, her breath ragged. Elias turned to her, his eyes burning with something she had never seen before. Not just respect, but pride. You stood your ground, he said. Clara swallowed, her hands still shaking. I wasn't going to let them take what's ours. The word slipped from her lips before she thought. Ours. Elias gave the faintest smile, small but real. And for the first time Clara felt the ranch was truly her home. The ranch was safe, but the memory of that night lingered. Clara could still hear the gunfire when she closed her eyes, could still feel the weight of the rifle in her hands. Yet instead of fear, she felt something else now, strength. She had stood beside Elias, not behind him. For the first time, she no longer felt like a guest in his house. She belonged to the fight as much as he did. Mary, too, saw the change. You're different, she said one morning, her voice weak but her smile strong. You stand taller now, Clara, like you finally believe you're worth something. Clara brushed her sister's hair back with gentle fingers. Maybe I do, or maybe Elias made me see it. Mary coughed softly but kept smiling. I think you've made him see something too. He was always alone before, now he's not. Clara carried those words with her as she worked through the spring days. She noticed the small things Elias did without speaking of them. How he left extra firewood stacked by the door. How he mended Mary's shawl without being asked. How his eyes softened when he thought she wasn't looking. He was still a man of few words, but his actions spoke louder than any vow. Yet the town did not soften. When Clara went into the mercantile, she heard the women whisper, "She's only there because she tricked him." A thief never changes. Their voices sliced through her, but this time she didn't let them see her hurt. She bought what she needed, lifted her head high, and left. That evening she told Elias about it. He listened without interrupting, then set down the bridle he was repairing. Let them mock, he said firmly. They'll tire of it. What matters is here, not there. Clara met his gaze. But do you ever regret it? Taking me in like this? Elias stood silent for a moment as if the question weighed heavily. Then he stepped closer, his voice low but certain. No, Clara, not once. You've given this house more than you know. You've given it life. The word struck deep and Clara felt warmth rise in her chest. She wanted to say more, but her throat tightened. Instead, she nodded, her eyes shining in the lamplight. But peace on the ranch was short-lived. The rustlers had been beaten back, yet anger still smoldered in town. Some men believed Elias had no right to defend himself so fiercely. Others thought Clara had brought trouble with her. A week later, when she went to fetch water from the well, she found a crude message scratched into the wood. Thief bride. Clara stood staring at it, her jaw clenched. She could have scrubbed it away, but instead she left it there, proof of what others thought. That night, when Elias saw it, his eyes darkened with fury. "I'll deal with whoever did this," he muttered. Clara placed her hand on his arm. "No, let them see. Let them think they've named me. It doesn't matter. I know who I am now." Elias looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You're stronger than most of them, Clara. Stronger than they'll ever admit." As spring ripened into summer, Mary's strength slowly returned. Her cough eased and her cheeks filled with color once more. Watching her sister walk across the yard beneath the warm sun, Clara felt tears sting her eyes. For the first time, hope was not just a fragile dream, it was real. One evening, as the sky burned orange with sunset, Elias stood beside Clara on the porch. They watched the cattle graze peacefully, the ranch spread wide before them. "You've made this place a home," Elias said quietly. Clara turned to him, her voice soft. "No, we did." The moment stretched between them, heavy with words unspoken, until Elias reached for her hand. His rough fingers closed around hers, steady and sure, and in that touch, Clara knew something had changed between them. No longer strangers bound by desperation, something deeper was beginning to take root. The summer sun dipped low, painting the land in gold. Clara walked the yard with Mary at her side, both stronger than they had been in months. The ranch was alive with sound. Cattle calling, wind brushing through grass, the steady rhythm of life that had once felt so distant. Clara paused at the fence, resting her hand on the worn wood. She remembered the girl she had been when she first stepped onto this land. Hungry, ashamed, her heart heavy with fear. That girl had stolen bread to keep her sister alive. That girl had expected punishment, not mercy. Now as the horizon glowed, she understood what had been given to her. Elias hadn't only offered his name, he had offered her a chance to stand tall again. Mary slipped her arm through Clara's. "You look happy," Clara smiled. "I am, for the first time in a long while." That evening, Elias came in from the fields, his hat in his hand, his shirt streaked with dust. He looked at Clara the way he always did now, steady as if she were the one thing he could count on. They sat by the fire after supper, Mary already asleep. Silence stretched between them, but it was no longer heavy. It was a silence filled with understanding. Finally, Elias spoke. His voice was quiet but sure. "Clara, when I asked you to take my name, it wasn't supposed to be more than a bargain. But it's become more than that." She caught her breath. She turned to him, her heart pounding. "What has it become?" Elias held her gaze, the firelight flickering across his face. "It's become my life. You marry this home, it's all I want. Not out of pity. Out of choice." Clara's eyes stung, tears rising fast. For so long she had carried the weight of shame, but now it lifted, replaced by something steady, warm, and true. She reached for his hand, her voice trembling but clear. "Then let it be a choice for me too. Not survival. Not fear, just us." Elias closed his rough fingers around hers, his touch both strong and tender. He didn't need to say more. The vow was in his eyes. Outside, the wind stirred the grass. Somewhere far off, a nightbird called. Clara leaned closer, her heart steady for the first time in years. What began with stolen bread had turned into something no one could steal away, belonging, dignity, and love freely given. In the weeks that followed, the town slowly quieted. Whispers faded as people saw the truth for themselves. Clara was no thief bride, but a woman of courage. Mary grew stronger, her laughter returning to the house. And Clara learned the rhythm of the land, her hands calloused, her heart open. One evening, as the three of them shared a meal on the porch, a neighbor passed by and tipped his hat. "Fine ranch you've got here," he said to Elias, but his eyes shifted to Clara with respect, not scorn. "You keep it well." Clara's heart swelled at the words, not because she needed their approval, but because she had finally won her own. As the sun set behind the ridge, Elias spoke quietly beside her. "It seems the world's learning what I knew all along." Clara smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. "That a thief can build a home?" Elias shook his head, his arm wrapping around her. "That love can make a family where no one expected." And with the last light fading over the frontier, Clara understood. She had stolen bread out of desperation, but what she had gained was far greater. She had stolen a place in a man's heart, and together they had written a story no one could ever take away. She stole bread to save her sister's life, yet in the end, she stole something greater, a name, a home, and a love that could never be taken. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Shadow Frontier Tales for more timeless Western romances. Your support helps us bring you more stories from the frontier.